Hello and welcome everyone to yet another tech enthusiastic video from Edureka. I'm Ravi and today we'll be discussing about loops in Java. So without wasting much time, let us quickly get started with the agenda for today's discussion. We shall begin with conditional statements in Java, then I'll explain you the loops in Java, which will be the for loop, while loop, do while loop and infinite loop. Loops in Java are used to run a certain code segment in a project for a finite number of times until a certain condition is satisfied. In this video, we will discuss the different types of loops in Java and their control flow along with their relative examples. If we recall the definition, we find that any particular loop is executed based on the validity of a condition. So, it is important that we also understand the terminology of conditional statements in Java. To understand the conditional statements in Java, let us consider a simple example of a car showroom where Mr. John goes to buy a car. He will be assisted by the sales manager of that particular car showroom. He says that he has a condition to buy a car of either of the three colors, which are black, red, or blue. So he searches the cars which are available in the three colors. First, he'll apply a condition in his mind for searching the car with the color black. If it is not available, then he will go for the car with the color red. If it is not available, then finally he will search for a car which is available in blue. So, if his condition is satisfied, then he'll buy the car. Else, he will not buy the car. That's how the computers also think when a loop is applied onto them. So according to our example, Mr. John finds a car with blue color and finally buys it. Now let us dive into the conditional statements which are available in Java. The conditional statements describes the compiler to carry out the execution of a particular code segment in a program until the condition is satisfied. The types of conditional statements available in Java are ternary operator, if operator, else if operator, else if ladder, nested if, break, and switch. Let us execute some examples related to all these conditional operators one by one. Firstly, we shall execute an example based on if loop. As you can see, this particular example is based on if loop. Here, I'm providing a number which is a negative integer number minus 10. And here, I'm providing an if condition which says that if the number is greater than 0, then I should be printing a printf statement which is number is positive. Else, my interpreter will be printing the message the number is negative. Now, let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the output has been generated, which says the number is negative. Since the number which I provided was a negative integer number, the condition here is failed, and the message which was lying outside the if loop, which is the number is negative, is being printed here. Now, let us execute the next control statement, which is the else if statement. As you can see, this particular example is based on else if loop. Here, I'm trying to provide an integer value to the variable a. According to my condition, if the number which I have included results in a modulus is equals to 0, then I should be printing the message as even number. Else, I should be providing the number as odd number. Now, let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. Now, as you can see, the output screen is asking me to enter an integer value. Let us try to input an even number. As you can see, I have inputted an even number and I have received an output as an even number as the condition of the if loop is been satisfied. Now let us try to input an odd number and see if the else loop is working properly or not. As you can see, it is asking for an input. Now let us try to input an odd number, which is 7, and see the output. As you can see, the output is generated as an odd number, which means the else loop is working fine. Now let us try to execute another example based on else if loop. Here I'm trying to execute an example based on year. I'll be trying to input an year, which the program will find out if it is a leap year or not. The condition I have provided for if statement is if the year modulus is equals to 0 and year modulus 100 is not equals to 0, or year modulus 400 is equals to 0, then I must print the message the year you have entered is a leap year. This means all the conditions which are stated in the if loop must be true. Else, it should print a message which says the year you have entered is not a leap year. Now, let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the output screen is asking me to enter an year. Now, let us try to enter a leap year. As you can see, the conditions which are provided in the if statement are true, and we are printing the message the year you have entered is a leap year. Now, let us try to provide an input which is not a leap year. As you can see, now it is asking for an year. Let us input the present year, which is 2019, and see if it is a leap year or not. As you can see, the conditions which were provided in the if loop are not satisfied, and the program is printing the message, which is the year you have entered is not a leap year. Now, let us try to execute some programs based on if-else ladder. In this particular example, we are trying to execute else if ladder condition. As you can see, here I'm trying to provide an integer type input to the variable choice. According to the choices I have provided, the first choice will select a sedan type class car, and the second choice will select SUV type class car. The third choice will provide sports type class car, and the fourth choice will provide crossbreed type class car. If the provided input is neither of all these four, then it will provide the last message, which is invalid choice. As you can see, the first if ladder will compare the choice. If the choice is equals to 1, then it will print the message sedan class. And the next else if ladder will compare the choice if it is equal to 2. If it is equals to 2, then SUV class will be printed. And in the next else if ladder, if the choice is equals to 3, then sports class message will be printed. And followed by that else if ladder, you'll have the next ladder which will compare the choice to be equals to 4. If it is true, then crossbreed segment message will be printed. If neither of all these conditions are true, then finally an else block will print a final message which says it is an invalid choice. Now let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the program has been successfully executed and it is asking for a choice. Now let us try to select SUV type vehicle. For that, we need to provide an input as 2. As you can see, the SUV class is successfully selected. Now, followed by this program, let us execute nested if condition. This particular example is based on nested if condition. In this particular example, I am going to provide inputs for 3 numbers. N1 is equals to 20, N2 is equals to 30, and N3 is equals to 10. And finally, we have another integer type variable which is greatest. Using the nested if condition, we'll try to find out the greatest number out of all these 3. As you can see, the first if statement has the condition if N1 is greater than equal to N2, then it should enter an inner if loop. Inside the inner if loop, we have a condition which says if N1 is greater than or equal to N3, then it should enter the loop and print greatest is equals to N1. Else, it should print greatest is equals to N3. After the completion of the if condition, if neither of the statements which are provided in the if condition are true, then the control will flow into the else condition. Inside the else condition, we have an if condition which states if N2 is greater than or equal to N3, then it should print N2. Else, it should print N3. Now, the final output will be generated along with a message the largest number is and the greatest value. Now let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the output has been successfully generated and it says the largest number is 30. Now let us try to execute an example based on ternary operator. This particular example is based on ternary operator. As you can see, I am trying to provide an input to two numbers which are A and B, which will be integer values. This particular statement is our ternary operation. This states that if the provided input A is greater than B, then A should be declared as the greater number. Else, if the condition is false, then B should be declared as the greater number. Now, let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the program has been successfully executed and it is asking for a value for the variable A. Let us enter 10. Now it is asking for a value to the variable B. Let us enter 5. Now let us see the output. As you can see, the output is 10. This states that the number A is greater than number B. Now let us try to execute an example based on switch conditional statements. So this particular example is based on switch conditional statement. Here I'll be asked a question as enter any month. So I'll be entering an integer value to the variable month. If the input value is 1, then the program will execute January. If the input value is 2, the program will execute February. Similarly, if the input value is 12, then it will execute December. And if neither of the cases match to the input which I provide, then it will execute a default message which will be invalid input. Now let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the program has been successfully executed and it is asking me to enter any month. Let us try to input 3. As you can see, March is the message which has been printed by the program. Now let us try to execute an example based on break statement. As you can see in this particular example, I have provided an integer array which has the values 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50. And here I'm trying to print the same array using a print statement with a provided condition. If the number is equals to 40, then the for loop should terminate at that particular instance. Now let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the output has been successfully generated and the values 10, 20 and 30 are printed, but 40 and 50 are not printed because at this particular if statement, we have provided a condition that if the number is equals to 40, then the control flow should break. So these were the few examples for conditional statements. Now let us continue with our loops. In Java, we have three types of loops. Firstly, the for loop, next is while loop, and finally, we have do while loop. The first type of loop is the for loop. The for loop is a conditional flow statement which allows you to execute a specific code segment for a finite number of iterations. For a for loop, you have three arguments, namely initialization variable, the condition variable, and the counter variable, which might be either increment or decrement. Now, let us try to execute a program to understand for loop in a better way. Before we execute an example of for loop, let us see the flow diagram of the for loop. Here, we have the initialization step at the first, and later, the control flow will enter a conditional statement. If the conditional statement happens to be true, then a particular code segment or a particular set of statements are executed, and after that, the control flow enters into the increment or decrement variable. And the variable will be incremented or decremented according to the condition provided. Once after the increment or decrement process is finished, then the control flow will again enter into the conditional statement and verifies the condition. If the condition is true, then the same loop will be executed. Else, the control will exit from the condition statement. Now, let us try to execute a program to understand this in a better way. This particular example is based on for loop. As you can see, I have a variable by the name ARR which is of string type, and this particular variable holds 5 elements which are John, Jerry, Ralph, Jim, and Tom, which happen to be the names of the employees of a particular company. Now, we will be using a for loop to display the names of these employees. This happens to be the for loop where we have the initialization variable which is I is equals to 0, and followed by that we have a conditional statement which is I is less than ARR data.length, and finally we have an increment variable which is I++. Now let us try to execute this for loop and see how does it work. As you can see, the loop has been successfully executed and we have our output here. Let us move on to the next example of for loop, which is either called as enhanced for loop or advanced for loop. In this particular for loop, we will be having a conditional statement at the very beginning of the program. The control flow enters the conditional statement and finds if there are any elements present in the array or not. If the statement is true, then the control flow will enter the initialization statement where a variable will be initialized. Once after the initialization is finished, the control flow will directly enter into the condition statement of the program. If there are any elements present in the program and the condition is true, then it will execute the set of statements and initialize the local variable. And once after the local variable is initialized, then the control flow will continue into the same loop again. If there are no elements present in the array, then the control flow will exit the condition and stop. And here, as you can see, if we come back into the initial conditional statement, if there were no elements present in the array, then the condition will become false and the control flow will directly exit the condition and comes to a stop. Now let us try to execute a program to understand this advanced for loop or enhanced for loop in a much better way. As you can see, I have considered the same example of the list of employee names, and here we are using the advanced for loop which states that the control flow must enter the array and print all the elements present in the array according to their index. Now let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. Once after the control flow will enter into the array, all the elements present in the array are printed until the last index value. As you can see, the program has been successfully executed and the output has been generated. With this, let us try to execute nested for loop. Before executing an example, let us try to understand the flow diagram of the nested for loop. In a nested for loop, the program will begin at start and the control flow will encounter the first loop statement. After that, the control flow will enter into the condition. If the condition is true, then it will enter into the inner for loop. If the condition is false, then the control flow will directly exit the first outer for loop. Now let us see if the condition is true. Once the condition is true, then the control flow will enter into the inner for loop, and inside the inner for loop it will encounter a condition statement. If the condition is true, then the control flow will start to execute a set of statements which are present inside the inner for loop, and once after the statements are executed, it will enter into the increment or decrement statements. Once after the increment or decrement is done, the control flow will again enter into the condition statement and checks if the condition is true or not. If the condition is true, the same loop will execute again, and if the condition is false, then it will exit the condition statement and it will enter into the increment or decrement variable of the outer for loop. Once after increment or decrement of the outer for loop is done, it will again check the condition in the outer for loop, and if it is false, then it will exit. Now let us try to execute a program to understand this in a much better way. This particular example is based on nested for loop. As you can see, I have considered an integer type variable which is array, which is going to be a two-dimensional array. And this particular loop is our outer for loop, and this particular loop is our inner for loop. Once after the outer for loop is triggered, it will start the inner for loop. Once after the execution of inner for loop is finished, then the inner for loop will trigger the outer for loop for increment or decrement. Once after the increment or decrement is done, then the condition is verified and the control flow will enter into the inner for loop again. Once after the inner for loop is executed, then it will again trigger the outer for loop and the condition is checked. If the condition is true, the process will continue, else the control flow will exit both the for loops and execute the statements which are present outside the loops. Now let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the program has been successfully executed and the data present in the row 1 and row 2 have been successfully printed here. As you can see, this is the first row, which is row 0, and this is the second row, which is row 1, and the data in the row 0 is 1, 2, and the data in the row 1 is 3 and 4. Now let us learn about while loop. While loop is a control flow statement that executes itself repeatedly until a given Boolean condition is satisfied. While loop can be considered as a repeating if statement. Let us see the flowchart of the while loop to understand this in a much better way. As you can see in this particular example, the control flow will begin at a decision. If the decision is true, then a particular segment of code is executed, and again the control flow will enter into the decision box. If the condition is true, then the loop is repeated, else the condition will exit the decision box. Let us try to execute an example to understand the while loop. This particular example is based on while loop. Here, I'll be providing an input to the integer type variable, which is num. And according to the while condition provided, here we'll find out if the input number is a prime number or not a prime number. For that, we have provided a condition in the while loop which states that if the variable I is less than or equal to the number divided by 2, then it should enter while loop. And inside the while loop, we have again a condition which states that if the number modulus I is equals to 0, then flag will be set to true and the control flow will be broken here and I will be incremented. And outside the while loop, we have an if statement which states if the flag is not true, then we should print it is a prime number, else we should print it is not a prime number. Now let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the program has been successfully executed and it is asking for an input. Now let us try to input a prime number. As you can see, the output is 3 is a prime number. Similarly, now let us understand do while loop. Do while loop is considered to be a conditional statement which is completely similar to the normal while loop. The only difference is that the do while loop has a Boolean or a conditional statement present at the end of the loop. This makes the do while loop execute at least for once. To understand this in a better way, let us check out a flow diagram. In this particular example, the control flow will first encounter the statement. So this particular statement will be executed at least for once without checking the condition. Once after the statements are executed, the control flow will enter into the conditional statement. Now the condition is checked. If the condition is true, then the same statements will be executed once more. Once after the statements are executed, then the condition is checked again. If the condition is true, then the same loop will be continued, else the control flow will exit the condition. Now let us try to execute a program to understand this in a much better way. This particular example is based on do while loop. So in here, I've considered an array into which I'll be entering elements. The process of entering the elements will continue until I provide an input 0. And finally, all the numbers which I have provided into the array will be summed up and the final summation of all the elements present in that particular array will be printed. Now let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the program has been successfully executed and it is asking me to enter the numbers. Let us try to enter a number other than 0. My first number will be 9 and after that let me enter another number other than 0 which will be 7, followed by that 5. As you can see, it is continuing to accept the numbers which are other than 0. And now let us try to enter 0 and see what happens. As you can see, the loop is been terminated and the summation of all the numbers which are provided into the array are summed up and the summation is provided as 25. So with this, let us execute the next type of loop, which is infinite loop. Before we continue into the infinite loop, Let me provide you a simple example to understand while loop and do while loop in a much better way. You must be familiar with the Roadrunner cartoons. As you can see, the Roadrunner here is running on while loop, and the coyote, which always tries to hunt the Roadrunner, is trying to execute itself using a do while loop. So here, the condition was checked first and the Roadrunner is safe, and in the case of coyote, it was using a do while loop and executed itself without checking the condition, and it is outside the cliff. So this is the basic difference between the while loop and the do while loop. Now with this, let us enter into the infinite loop. The infinite loop is not actually a practically designed loop. Instead, it is a situation where a condition of the loop fails and the execution persists until you stop it manually. Let us try to execute a program to understand infinite loop in a much better way. So this particular example is based on infinite loop where I have provided a while loop. So here the condition of the while loop is always true, and the control flow will enter into the while loop and will print the message Edureka. Let us try to execute this program and see how does it work. As you can see, the program has been successfully executed and it is continuing to print the Edureka message continuously. Now I have to stop this manually and exit the infinite loop. As you can see, the infinite loop has been successfully terminated now. So with this, we come to an end of this session. I hope you have understood the conditional statements in Java and also the loop statements present in Java. If you have any queries related to this session, then please feel free to write them in the comment section below. Till then, thank you and happy learning.